Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would have loved the member from Dennery South to present before I speak, because I'm aware that he has a full presentation on the strategy and the plan, which would have been a lot more instructive if we had seen the strategy and the plan, even for us to comment, because we, in a sense, comment in almost, in a vacuum. But that notwithstanding, I think I will have to comment a lot on what I have read in the press, what I've read on Facebook, and what I have seen through pieces of news stories. Mr. Speaker, I must tell you, I was a little inspired this morning to speak today. I know in our midst, we have a former cricketer, the member from Dennery North, former cricket manager. We have on the other side two honorable gentlemen who, in my growing days, I would have hoped that they would have reached the Olympics and brought us glory. But I believe somewhere along the way they both got distracted. The member from Dennery South and the member from Groseley. And I'm sure those of us of that same generation would remember the sprinting prowess of the member from Dennery South and middle distance runner, the member from Groseley. And Mr. Speaker, I learned this morning that, in fact, one of our lost or missed Olympians was a long-distance runner from Miko North, Honorable Gail Regobert. I never knew she had pretensions of being an Olympian in the long distance, and she told us this morning of her training methods, Mr. Speaker. And and Mr. Speaker, on a lighter note, I'm sure we even have a potential jockey in this house, the member from Ancillary Canneries. He's already behaving like he's on steroids, so you can imagine he'd quite, suitably fit in at the DSH feature race in February. But Mr. Speaker, on a very serious note, because he behaves that way, Mr. Speaker, he's always hyperactive. So, Mr. Speaker,
you've made your statement. Move on.
Yeah, I like the interruptions, Mr. Speaker. It puts me back on course. Mr. Speaker, I must say to you, today was not scheduled, and as you probably would know, today is actually report day for a lot of the secondary schools in the north, and I was supposed to have spent the day at my daughter's school. In fact, she's here in the gallery, along with a friend. That's the point I was going to make. So I know, Mr. Speaker, I have a responsibility to conduct myself in the very best parliamentary manner, so that she would have the best opinion of her father. But I will not compromise, Mr. Speaker, on fulfilling my duties as a parliamentarian to scrutinize the actions of the government. Mr. Speaker, it would be extremely difficult for me to stand in this honorable house and to vote against any measure which would promote and enhance the sports of this country. I have spent many years, in sports as a young youth and sports leader. I have been involved in cricket at the regional and the international level. I've had the opportunity to be a tournament director of a world event and to be involved in Cricket World Cup and to work for the West Indies Cricket Board. I've managed an international cricketer and assisted a couple of other international cricketers along their journey. And I have a passion for sports, Mr. Speaker. I have a passion for youth and a passion for sports. And it would be extremely difficult for me to vote against anything that would advance sports in St. Lucia. Some of the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, I don't necessarily disagree with them, and I think we share a common vision for sports development in this country. And we may disagree on the specifics and how it should be positioned, how it should be designed, but I think you will find among ourselves, and if there is the easiest cross-party committee that can be formed and you'll get unanimity, it'll probably be along sports lines. Because I think, though we may disagree on some, the specifics, we will agree on the advancement of sports and the necessity for government to spend more money on sports, Mr. Speaker. But I have a difficulty, Mr. Speaker, with some of the details, and I want to focus on that in my presentation and towards the end, express my support for some of the things that are needed in this country to advance sports, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I listened carefully to the member from Miku South this morning to try to understand exactly what was being proposed. And I trust that I will ask questions along the way, and answers can probably be provided when necessary. I heard the member say that the Taiwanese have agreed to provide $60 million for the next 5 years. 12 million has already received for 2017. And also a decision was taken that 12 of the $60 million will be allocated to sports. And therefore, what was needed now is a bridging loan that would allow for the 12 million allocated for sports over 5 years to be spent now. Well, over 4 years, because 2017 has already been received, so 4 more years is left. So you have 12 million to spend over the next 4 years, maybe 3 million each year, but he basically wants to spend all now, and therefore this is a bridging loan. Now, Mr. Speaker, I also heard the member for Grosley give us the assurance that of the 24 million that this motion speaks of, at least 20 million will be spent on facilities. 20 million will be spent on facilities. Mr. Speaker, I must tell you though, I was very excited when I heard the member from Miku South said that there's $12 million in grants every year from the Taiwanese government, and it's for 5 years, and I was super happy that $60 million would be spent on sports over the next 5 years. And I believe if we got $60 million to be spent on sports, we'd be very happy in this country. But alas, it is only 12 million that would be allocated to sports. The member from Grosley said at least 20 million will be spent on facilities. Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of talk in recent times in this country. And there's an elephant in the room that we just need to clear some issues on. I remember the member for Grosley said 20 million on facilities. He never said what's happening to the 4 million. In the motion before us, 8 million EC or 3 million US is budgetary support for the year. We have no idea exactly what it will be used for. We have no idea. But 24 million will be spent for the strategy. I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker, whether or not the very first step had to be the adoption and maybe even discussion in this House of a national sports policy. We've had sports policies in the past, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, they probably have documents lying somewhere that speaks of a sports policy. Because in many ways, the sports policy would align all of us nationally as to where we have to go with sports development in this country. We have a strategy and a plan, but I'm not sure what it is emanating from. And the member for Miku South this morning spoke of sports and how we see the sports landscape in St. Lucia will be shaped, and I'll come to that later on. But I'm asking, where is that being informed? What he was saying, is it documented somewhere that the sports administrator can take such a document and see clearly what's the vision of where we are going and how we going to get, well, the strategy and the plan will see how we get there. But the policy would indicate where we are going in sports in this country and what are our priority areas. Because if we had such a policy that outlined the priority areas, what the objectives are, then we can know what that strategy would be and what the implementation plan would be. So if you're going to spend $24 million of 12 million US, like the Minister of Member South said, we would know exactly where that 12 million US would be going to be put into. We would know, because we have a clear idea of what the policy is. So I'm asking, the strategy and the plan, where is it linked? How is it linked? To what? What's the vision? What's the policy objectives that we have for sports in this country? And a lot of things were said here this morning. I disagree with some of them, but largely I agree with it, Mr. Speaker. And that brings me back to some of the confusion we've had over the last few months. And that has to do with the Packer Company. Now, I will say from the start, Mr. Speaker, and I've said so in this House, that I believe we have very competent architects, designers, and project managers in St. Lucia. The Darren Sammy Cricket Ground was designed by St. Lucian. It was designed by St. Lucian. And it became the leading cricket facility in the Caribbean. Probably been surpassed now. But it was the leading cricket facility. And it was used by the ICC as a reference to how you can build facilities for small countries like ours. In addition, the same individuals who designed the Darren Sammy Cricket Ground also designed the Providence Ground in Guyana. And they also designed the St. Kitts National Cricket Ground, the Warner Park. That's the capacity we have. The same St. Lucians design all three facilities. And if you ever watch cricket on television, you will notice a similarity in all the facilities. Mr. Neville Skit, this is Claude Guillaume, Mr. Mark Hennicat, people like Mr. Hippolyte as an engineer, Mr. Francis, electrical engineering. There was a team that did it. And we have the capacity to do so. But in comes the Packer Company. Mr. Speaker, when I first heard of the Packer Company, I took my phone and I Googled the Packer Company. They had nothing to do with sports facilities. Nothing. They were hospitality industry procurement specialists. But they got a contract for 32 million EC for our sports strategy and plan. I went through the brochure, online brochure, no mention of sports facilities. As I searched all the principles involved, I saw Don Lockerbie, sports and events. But the company had no track record of involvement in sports facilities. But they got a $32 million contract. We'll come to the contract in a while, Mr. Speaker. I have it. Mr. Speaker, yesterday when I Googled the Packer Company, there's also an additional page now about Don Lockerbie and sports facilities, whatnot. But it wasn't there 2 months ago. Obviously, the criticism has reached, and some amends have been made. But they did not update the brochure.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. The honorable member is obviously misleading the House. If he can make the document a document of the House to show...
Which document?
He says that he has a document to show that there's a $32 million contract. So make it a document of the House, because I think it has been made very plain today by a very eloquent and comprehensive presentation from the member for Grosley, who clearly stated, and we have denied, the Minister of Sport has denied, and also the Prime Minister, there's no $32 million contract with the Packer Company. So if you have a document that you can share, I think before you go on to do that, you must substantiate it with evidence, because people are watching television.
When he gets there, I will get to it.
But
he's not at that
he has
stage.
already said so. There's a 32
No, he said he
million.
has a document. He has not made reference to any contents of the document.
Because you see why I said he's on steroids, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, earlier, when you made that slide, you said on the side.
No,
in other words, for the humor of it all.
No, Mr. Speaker.
But do not go back to that reference.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, you may ask the member from the Henry South, when you see an individual on steroids, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It means it is.
Honorable member.
In sports?
Don't go back there.
Okay. All right. It's not. Mr. Speaker, I use a nasal spray every day. It's steroid. But anyway, let's not go on. Mr. Speaker, let's go on. I mean, there's a little... What, the steroids? Yeah. Mr. Speaker, let's continue. But I have, Mr. Speaker, since the honorable member said that no such contract exists, he stood here and he told the House that no such contract exists. I have the document, Mr. Speaker. As soon as I'm finished, I'll make copies. If you want the House to break now, the House can break and copies can be made for every member. The contract is signed by the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Donovan Williams, on the 16th of June 2018, and by Mr. Douglas Parker, President of the Parker Company. And I noticed the AG is not present.
Do you need to make reference to it now?
Yes, I'm going to make a lot of references to it, Mr. Speaker, because the member from Ancillary Counties has just sworn to this House.
Quick question, how many pages, sir? How many pages?
Pardon?
Quick question, how many pages?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We'll only use 13 for now.
No.
Are we still denying it?
No. I'm just trying to get to you that if you could make a presentation while we make copies, is that possible?
Unless.
Mr. Speaker, on the point of order, when I came to the House to make presentations, I made sure I had copies ready here. Members on this side, that has become now the habit of the House. I can't imagine the member would have not known that he was going to have to share the document. He's got marks on it. He knows what he's doing. He said he's going to reference it exhaustively, and he should be required to do that.
Mr. Speaker, I think the previous Speaker of this House made a ruling and shared copies of authorities that made it very clear to honorable members that only ministers are required to print and circulate copies of documents that they are referring to in the official conduct of their duty. It is not a requirement, it's only ministers. This was ruled in this House by an earlier Speaker, and documentation from Roberts and other sources was shared with us that other members have no obligation to circulate documents. But Mr. Speaker, I have no difficulty in copies being made. I have no difficulty.
No.
No, I can reference it. Ministers are required. That's established.
Honorable member, you, a former minister, a former speaker, may so rule, but where I'm sitting here now, if you're going to make reference to a document with implications, I would like it to be a document and so circulated so that I myself may see and verify what you're saying is the truth. I'm not going to question you, but I'm going to tell you that you would have to circulate it. So that is why I was asking, is there any way you could continue your presentation whilst I get the copies made in the office?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to reference the document in my presentation. And therefore, it would be extremely difficult for me to proceed, Mr. Speaker. But if you want me to proceed, Mr. Speaker, without it, I'm fully prepared to do so, Mr. Speaker, whilst copies are made and circulated. I can always come back to it at some time. But
very well.
I would like to have it in my hand,
yes,
so I'm quoting correctly when I speak. So what would you wish me to do?
I'd like the copies made now, sir.
And do we break, Mr. Speaker?
Your choice. If you would like, I'll take
sure,
5 minutes. If
I would
not,
never break, Mr. Speaker.
I would so allow you to continue and then give you the added time.
Let's break, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Prime Minister, were you about to say something?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. First of all, if he's going to give the document, first of all, we have to know whether, in fact, the document is an authentic document. You laugh, but we have seen in the past that documents have been circulated in the public domain that have made reference to being authentic, and we know they're not. Okay? I reserve that comment. But the fact is that I can't. I have no idea, Mr. Speaker, if in fact the document he has is an authentic document. And so therefore, that's why it has been that ministers must make reference to documents to know that it's an authentic document. I have no idea. So where did he get the document? Okay? And so the point is, it's a relevant issue to determine whether in fact the document is relevant or not. Because we may be just talking in circles. It may not be authentic. We don't know.
Yes, I will. I will take that break now. I will so suspend. No, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm not going to allow you to answer that question. No, I'm not putting the Prime Minister to answer that question at this present time. That's for the part. But I will so rule that we suspend for just 5 minutes. I will have the copies made and then we'll resume right away. Honorable members, the issue before us is the issue of documents and whether documents can be tendered and the documents of this House. It is right that there is an obligation on ministers to tender or make before this House available documents, official documents that they're going to refer to. So this is not a question, and I don't even have to ask, and I should not have to ask any minister to so tender a document that he has in his capacity as a minister to so tender this document. The problem we have is when we have non-minister members wanting to tender documents. The problem with that, and as I rightly said, that if a member is going to make reference to a document, I need to verify that this is the document he's referring to. I cannot simply allow a member to just flash in there, I have this document, and he may be saying or quoting things from a document which may be in itself fictitious or may not even be. I would want to think that all members are so honorable that they will not do this to this honorable House. The document before me that a member for Castries South is looking to make reference to is a document he has so indicated that is a contract between the government of St. Lucia and the Packer Company. In the document, though the name government of St. Lucia is so written, and the Packer Company is so written, the details as to who the parties of these documents are is yet to be ascertained by me, because somewhere in the document, on the face of the document, it says that acting hearing and represented by blank. As the same thing, another place also acting hearing and so represented by blank on the second part. Further, some pages are missing, so we start from one page from 3, we jump over to 5 and 6 without making reference. Now, in my practice as a legal counsel, though I don't advise myself as Speaker of the House, one thing that I was so informed and so taught, you do not put signatures only on one page, you must also attach other parts of a document to the other parts so that you could see there is a continuation of a document. On that basis, Honorable Member for Castries South, I will so rule that I'm not going to allow you to so tender this document as an official agreement between the government of St. Lucia and the Packer Company.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. But I note your words. You will not allow me to tender it as a document of the House. But just like you quoted from Mays in terms of the responsibility of ministers to submit documents, I can still, as a member who's not part of the government, I can cite the document. I am not required, as you rightfully said, to tender it as a document of the House, but I can refer to it according to the same section of Mays that you read a short while ago. So if you allow me, I will refer to it, but it does not have to become a document of the House.
I will also not allow you, Honorable Member, to quote and to enter this document. I'm not saying you cannot say you have this document and reference your document, but I cannot allow you to quote anything from this document to so enter into the record of this Honorable.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I shall not prolong this issue, Mr. Speaker. The point at which we broke, Mr. Speaker, I was making reference to the engagement of the Packer Company, which a member from Miku South indicated this morning, had in fact been done we've not been told exactly what was the cost of the engagement with the Parker Company. It has not been declared to us how much money was paid for phase 1 to the Parker Company. And we are still not being told in this honorable House how much money is being paid to the Parker Company for phase 2. And one may question whether documents are authentic or not. And I actually believe, Mr. Speaker, a mountain is being made out of a molehill, Mr. Speaker. But that's not my headache, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, no one wants to declare to this House, and I think if we've been asked, Mr. Speaker, to approve a motion to borrow money for the implementation of the strategy and plan, which includes the project management services, at least it is fair and reasonable that we are informed of exactly how much the consultant was paid for the first phase and for the second phase. Mr. Speaker, that's even more critical against the background where I presented that at least 3 major sporting facilities in this region were built, were designed and project managed by St. Lucians. And I think that it is fair. And I'm glad that the honorable member from Grosley agreed of the necessity to use local talent, Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Speaker, a point of order. We are in this honored House to seek permission to borrow the money. And this House is here to discuss the terms of those borrowings. That is what we're here at this House. I don't know that there's any requirement, Mr. Speaker, for this House to be involved in who is being engaged and who's being paid what. What we are here for is to discuss the borrowing from the Bank of St. Lucia for the sum of $32 million. And what we were required to do is to put, because it's a guarantee. So what we're doing is giving that guarantee, and we've given the terms of what those payments are. The details in terms of who he wants.
This is not a guarantee.
Honourable member.
There are other methods. If in fact the member from Castries South wants those answers, there are other methods available to him to be able to pursue those questions. But he should not mislead this House in any way to believe that we're here to discuss those things, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Prime Minister, the resolution, in my mind, we have been here to authorize the borrowing of 42,400,000. The member, we must always remember, the member is a member is a member of the opposition. Not being a member of cabinet, so he will not be privy to some things. So he will, within his own capacity, there's some things he'll want some answers to, and question some things. It is not, he may question you, but you may, or the minister may choose not to provide the answer in the manner he's asking. But he can question something because he's a member of the opposition trying to solicit answers from the government. There are under our standing orders for formal questions to be asked, and it's an option that he has that he can so wish to utilize.
Mr. Speaker, I'm guided, and I just ask for your further guidance. The suggestion by the member from Castries South is that we're obligated and we came here to discuss that. The fact is that there is a motion on the floor which speaks specifically to the amount of money we're going to borrow and the terms. Clearly, he is allowed to ask questions about it, but the fact is giving the suggestion that this side is withholding that information.
Let's proceed to bring this motion to conclusion.
Mr. Speaker, if you are asked to approve the borrowing of $30 million and you're now being told you must not ask what it is going to be used for, I think that's against the spirit of being in the House, is against the spirit of the standing orders. But Mr. Speaker, let's move on because there are more important points to be made. So facilities are also being built, Mr. Speaker. We don't even know how much each facility will cost. And I believe we heard a comprehensive presentation from the member from Miku South, a presentation from the member from Hlaire. It would be instructive, Mr. Speaker, which is why I started off asking that I'd love to see the presentation by the Minister of Sports before I spoke. Because at least I would see that Miku South Complex would cost X amount, Sufre Mini Stadium would cost X amount, I would know A&E fees, consultancy fees would cost X amount. And I said so. I find it extremely difficult to vote against money for the advancement of sports in this country. But I'm being told that I cannot even ask what the money is to be spent on. But, Mr. Speaker, the member from Hlaire gave the assurance that at least $20 million will be spent on construction. I will take that and move on, Mr. Speaker. But I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, that I know the individual involved, Mr. Don Lockerbie. I've worked with him. And I will give some credit to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister can sell a lot of stories. He can sell a lot of things. Some people say he's a very good marketer. Mr. Don Lockerbie is a very good venue development specialist. He's very good. He is. I've worked with him. He's also very good at selling stories and visions of how things can be. I worked with him. During Cricket World Cup, Mr. Speaker, we were told in this region about the necessity to build those huge cricket grounds and how they would bring so much tremendous results for us, and Cricket World Cup would bring in so much. Those stories were sold to us. And the legacy, Mr. Speaker, a lot of it was true, but there was a lot, and I bought it. That's why he will not fool me twice. That's right. That's why he will not fool me twice. That's why he will not fool me twice. And he has a very famous saying, you must think big, you must have vision. And I too went on tours with him, Super Bowl, Jacksonville. And let me tell you, sitting with the gentleman is always an exceptionally pleasant exercise. You know, when you hear historically about somebody who can sell snow to the Eskimos, he can do that. But he's also a very good development specialist. You cannot deny that. But a lot of what he proposes are not really relevant to our region and to St. Lucia. Because in St. Lucia, we resisted spending the amount of money they told us to spend at Beausejour at that time. We neither did. We spent money. I'm not denying we spent money. But let's not go into that. I don't want to open that thing, because up to this day, the audited statements have never been tabled in this house. But let's not go there. That's not for today. So, 80 million. The audited statements are there. And, Mr. Speaker, but let's not fight that battle today. So a lot of islands spend millions of dollars building huge stadiums. Go to Antigua, because we were told that's where it's going. The same gentleman tried to convince the ICC that cricket should be played on artificial turf. That cricket should be played on artificial turf, and he can get one design for it to be played on artificial turf. Of course, the ICC, in its wisdom and its research, decided that was not acceptable. And as a CEO of West Indies Cricket, I sat many times in Dubai in discussions as to whether that even made sense. USACA, United States Cricket Association, employed the same gentleman as CEO because he sold them this grand vision. He is going to transform cricket in America. After a year and a half or so, they asked him, they parted company, because they realized what he was saying, that you would have those magnificent stadiums with artificial turf and drop-in pitches, and cricket will be paid throughout the year in all the snow outside. And he's very good at that. He's very good at that, Mr. Speaker. He's very good at that. And he comes to St. Lucia and he sells a vision. Huh? Yes. That the Dyer Mall will be a Madison Square Garden, whatnot, Mr. Speaker. And I even think, Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister, members, Miku South can probably help me. Didn't his son even come here to play at jazz, Mr. Speaker? His son, I think, he even convinced persons in jazz in St. Lucia that his son should play at the jazz festival here in St. Lucia. And I think he was supposed to play here at the jazz festival. That's how good he is, Mr. Speaker. That's how good he is. So you can understand, Mr. Speaker. You can understand, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, all what I am saying here, I've said to him personally, because I do have a lot of regard for his expertise. But I will keep saying to him over and over, what he believes in, what he's selling, is not for our small island in St. Lucia. Temper it. Obviously, he was not tempered in this instance, Mr. Speaker. Because when I look at some of the drawings that I've seen, Mr. Speaker, and I think my colleague from Denry North touched on some of it, and I'll repeat it. I believe we need to improve facilities in St. Lucia. But the idea that you will now transform certain facilities and use artificial grass, Mr. Speaker, I think is flawed. And the member from Denry North said so. And he gave a number of reasons. And the member from Grosley responded. So let me just take you through some of what the member from Grosley said. I think the member from Grosley is saying that what was expressed is not entirely wrong. However, the science and technology of artificial turf has progressed sufficiently, in his view, to give him satisfaction. And I still disagree with him. He's right. The technology and the science has improved. But FIFA, up to this day, still refuses to approve the use for artificial turf for official football. And I can tell you, up to 2 years ago, the Women's World Cup for FIFA, was held in Canada. And Canada applied, and I'll remind the Honorable House, a young lady called Cindy Emmanuel McLean from Miku South actually worked for FIFA in that Women's World Cup. And they wanted to use artificial turf, and FIFA did not agree. And look at football. Those of us who watch Premier League, Bundesliga, all of that, do you see any matches being played on artificial turf? Do you ever see any World Cup football being played on artificial turf? MLS is played on artificial turf. Mr. Speaker, because the technology is not so advanced to overcome some of the issues, and this morning the member from Grosley actually explained to us the mechanics of how it is injuries are precipitated when you play on artificial surfaces. And he's right, the technology has improved, but it is not good enough. The second point on the artificial turf is you cannot play cricket on artificial turf. So even if it has been improved for football, it definitely is a no-no for cricket. It's a definite no-no for cricket. So consider what's happening in Soufrière now. In Soufrière,
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order. Again, the member from Castries South is bringing information to this House again that he's misleading the House. The Canadian Women's FIFA was played on artificial turf, all of the matches.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, can I move on, please? Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker,
you see, this is a Prime Minister is indicating that you're misleading because he's of the opinion, or whether he has evidence to support it, that the matches were played. You indicating, I don't think I could verify that. So, unless we want to back and forth.
Okay. So, what do you want me to do? Withdraw it? Okay, Mr. Speaker.
That is your
member from Miku South.
That is your.
Oh. Don't withdraw. Well, Mr. Speaker. So the member of Miku South says all matches in the FIFA Women's World Cup was played on artificial turf. We probably understood it differently. Maybe I misread. Maybe I was misinformed, and he's correct. So we will move on. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, no football match in the Premier League in England is played on artificial turf. None in Syria is played on artificial turf. None in Germany is being played on artificial turf. No men's football World Cup has been played on artificial turf. And there's a reason for that, Mr. Speaker. There's a reason for that. So let's put the injuries aside. The issue of heat was raised. In the afternoon, the heat on those artificial surfaces are significant, and the member from Grosley again explained how the heat can cause abrasions and how serious it can be. But he says he thinks the technology has advanced enough, he can live with it. Issues of runoff, because you have to understand how the artificial turf is constructed. And when you water it regularly, the runoff that comes and the drainage to carry that, you have to be careful where the runoff goes. That to be careful with the runoff, because these are rubber chips that is there. And when the heat, because in temperate countries, it's not a problem, you know, Mr. Speaker. In temperate countries, it's not a problem. But in tropical countries, it's a problem. The thing is not by accident. There is not a plethora of artificial turf in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Barbados. Barbados has one for hockey. For hockey. There's a reason why, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, the issue of maintenance came up. And the member from Grosley said that he believes it is cost more expensive to maintain the natural grass than the artificial turf. He's right to the extent that he says, if he says the cost of a world-class natural grass surface and a world-class artificial turf will be about the same to maintain, world-class. And that's important, world-class. And I'll tell you why. No, you didn't say world-class. I'm telling you, you're right if you say world-class. But if it's not world-class, it's cheaper to have grass. It's cheaper than to have an artificial turf. Because the disparity in the quality of the surface between a community field and a world-class grass field is more, that disparity is greater than an artificial turf, world-class and community. So, Mr. Speaker, when we were building Beausejour, Mr. Speaker, when we were building Beausejour, the standard of outfields in the Caribbean was at a low standard. We decided in St. Lucia we were going to revolutionize the outfield. And for the first time in the Caribbean, we introduced a sun cap for cricket. A sun cap, which would enhance drainage. We decided we wanted to have the best grass. And Trinidad had just hosted the FIFA Under-17 World Cup, and 5 stadia were built by Terraforma. And they came up with a hybrid grass from Trinidad, Bermuda 249, that they use. And it was an exceptional grass, which thrived in our conditions. And we decided that we were going to use that grass for Beausejour. It's a grass that grows more horizontal than vertical. That grass is a very special grass. A very special grass. To maintain it costs money. And like the member from Grosley said, the frequent aeration and fertilizing whatnot and cutting of it. But it's one of the best outfields for cricket in terms of diving and sliding. But it is not a grass that you will put on every playing field. You will do it at your field where you play international cricket, which is why when VG was being redone, and I told the guys, do not put that Bermuda grass there because it is not very resistant to the pad pool and the local, aggressive weeds we have. And if you do not spend money maintaining it, it will be overrun. It will take so much to maintain it. Same thing, many other playing fields. Guys, everybody wants the grass there is at the Darren Sammy ground. But that's a world-class venue, and to maintain that world-class surface will cost money. But our local savanna grass can work in our community playing fields, and it is so resilient, the pad pool and those other things will never overrun it. Look at Darren Sammy Cricket Ground. You can virtually stand in the stands and see all the different shades of green. Pad pool that's infesting the ground like this, and it takes so much to get it out. In fact, we've reached a stage where the Darren Sammy Cricket Ground has to be resurfaced. So if you have a lower standard surface, and again, at Beausejour, we had about 3 inches of sun. After us, Guyana put 8 inches, so virtually a storm can pass in Guyana, and within half an hour, you can start a cricket match because there's so much sun. You do not have to have sun caps on all our playing fields. So yes, it can be equally expensive, but it can also be cheaper depending on the quality of field that you put in place. But there's also another point, Mr. Speaker. Look at Soufrière, for example. So Soufrière has a playing facility. It can accommodate a 400-meter track. It can accommodate cricket. Now, I'll tell you something, Mr. Speaker. When you put a 400-meter track on the playing field, where do you play the cricket? You recognize the space is severely reduced. It becomes oval. So your cricket field now is severely reduced. And in fact, and the members from Denry South and Gross, they can correct me, a 400-meter track with a football field in between is the minimum size football field that's acceptable for football. The minimum size field that's acceptable for football. For you to have an international size, you actually should not have a 400-meter track, which is why no football stadium that's been built now, they allow you to have a 400-meter track. At Wembley in England, there's actually an arrangement in place, not Wembley, London Stadium, where you can remove the seats and expand to allow the facility to be used. So there's an issue with Soufrière. It means now you're going to put artificial turf in Soufrière, but you cannot play cricket there anymore. So the member announced this morning that they go into some place called where, Rablo, or what's it? Rubel or somewhere, where they will now have to build a new cricket field. And with that new cricket field comes new stands, new changing rooms, new seating. But you had a facility that you can essentially use, but because you put in artificial turf, you now have to disband it and create a new cricket field. But there is another issue you have to consider. There was burning flames in Soufrière last month, and before that there was another concert where you can have a concert in a playing field with natural grass. Guys can drink, break a bottle, you smoke, you drop your cigarette, you crush it. Will you do that on artificial turf? Will you do that on artificial turf? Will you allow a concert on a playing facility that has artificial turf, where guys may break bottles, guys may smoke out their cigarettes? Yes, you do. Well, I guess you will. But I hope you realize the cost of maintenance and repair now increases significantly. American Airlines? No. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, you know, we can talk about America where there's no smoking in indoor arenas, whatnot. It's a different thing when you have a Jacquier show down in Soufrière on the artificial turf surface. It's a different experience. So, Mr. Speaker, those things have to be considered. So, yes, I heard what the member said, but when you're going to remove playing fields, convert playing fields in Miku and in Dennery and in Grosile cricket field and put artificial turf, I think we need to think long and deep about that. Not whether it should be upgraded and saying, you know, not whether we should upgrade it, but like I said at the start of my presentation, I think we'll have disagreement with the details of exactly how it is done and what it is done. Mr. Speaker, a point was made by the member for Dennery North, and he spoke, Mr. Speaker, about community fields, and the member from Grosile kind of ridiculed it, but he was making a different point to what the member for Grosile reacted to. I think he was making a point that we cannot abandon the community fields, the fields like Bexar playing field, the Cicero playing field, the Bouton, you know, those are community fields used by communities. And not that the community should not have an upgraded facility like the Soufrière Mini Stadium. We think Soufrière should have an upgraded mini stadium. We think so. But you should not abandon the small fields dotted throughout this country. Now, the member made a very significant point, and it is something that has always challenged me in sports. The idea that our generation, this generation has, and I think the Prime Minister might have called it fast food something, and it's true. Young people do not want to live here and go to VG playing field to go and practice and train and play. They want to know the playing field is right in their corner. Which is why during the heyday of the Bulls and Michael Jordan, everybody was putting up a little rim in their backyard and on their bridge so they can play basketball. Nobody wants to go to the court down the road anymore because they want it right there on the block with them. And it's a serious point. But our culture in St. Lucia is such that you will not ask young men living in Cicero to go to VG playing field to play or to go to Marshall playing field to play. And especially when they know there is a small community field right there. That community field has to be maintained. And we're moving in a day and age where sports, and we just said here this morning by members opposite, that is gender neutral. We don't have male sports and female sports anymore. So now when we have grassroots football programs, and you're going to have one in Cicero sooner or later, You have to make provisions for the young girls who will be playing there every Saturday and on evenings. Not going to ask them to go in the bush and change their clothes and to, you know, do whatever they have to do. You're not going, young men can do that. Not that they necessarily should do it. You understand? But the community playing fields are important too. And I think that was the point the member was making. Not that we should not have great community playing fields. So, Mr. Speaker, this strategy needs to be reflective of our culture and how we respond to our culture. I heard we have 150 playing fields, and almost as if that's a curse. It's not a curse, Mr. Speaker. It's a burden, but it's not a curse. And we should not seek to reduce the 150 to 40 facilities. I think that's the wrong way to go. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. So I think this is flawed from this perspective. Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I started off by saying, we needed to have a sports policy that really outlines our objectives and where we're going, what our priorities are. And out of that, we come up with a strategy, and then we have the work plan, the implementation plan. Because, Mr. Speaker, what is our objective for sports in this country? Is our objective healthy lifestyles and maximum participation? Is our objective to produce elite athletes that can win medals and win world championships for us? What's our objective? If you're going to spend $30-odd million, what's the objective, Mr. Speaker? What do we want to produce in 5 years, in 10 years? And the Prime Minister speaks of money for programs, and you must have programs. You must have programs. But what is the objective, Mr. Speaker? If you must tailor your investment in the facilities and in the programs towards a desirable outcome, you have to. You have to, Mr. Speaker. So I'm asking, with this strategy and this plan, what is the desired objective? And we just had the social labs and the economic labs and the PMANDO. I would love to know what came out of that. Because before you even decide from PMANDO what the outcomes will be, you're already implementing action. So how does it dovetail? How does it fit in? So, Mr. Speaker, I believe one of our biggest hindrances in St. Lucia is the absence of a sports culture, Mr. Speaker. What's dropped today? Yeah, Mr. Speaker, and I just need to correct, Mr. Speaker, because my colleagues are just indicating to me that, in fact, Germany, Brazil, and Spain filed a lawsuit in Canada that demanded that FIFA and the Canada FA to install natural grass in the six arenas for the World Cup. But it came too late, and the lawsuit had to fall by the wayside. So they probably end up playing. But I know that there were serious issues. I sat at a symposium where that was discussed. So I knew there was an issue. But moving forward, the point has been made, Mr. Speaker, that the natural grass is preferred over the artificial. So let me concede, Mr. Member for South, Miko South, that you were partly right. But the point remains. Yeah, wanted fried. Yeah. No, but the point is made, Mr. Speaker. So we have to address the issue of a sports culture in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. A sports culture. And, Mr. Speaker, if you recall, before 1997, we were not playing international cricket in St. Lucia. We had no national stadium with a synthetic track. The members on the other side, who were track and field athletes, came out of running on grass, barefooted. Imagine if they had a synthetic track. I said earlier they got distracted along the way. They did not become gold medal Olympians, Mr. Speaker. But just imagine if those gentlemen had grown up learning to run on synthetic track. They learned to run on grass at Mindo Phillip Park. And all of that was before 1997. Mr. Speaker, I've had the honor to work in every Caribbean island in sports. And I have seen the public response to sports in other islands compared to St. Lucia. And our sports culture is very underdeveloped in this country. And the member from Mico North made the point, and even the member from Mico South spoke about the attitudinal change and what's needed. So we need to work on having a sports culture, Mr. Speaker. But one of the critical things for a sports culture, Mr. Speaker, is that it must first start off with the issue of participation. We have to get every single child in St. Lucia, unless you have a certifiable reason for you not to participate in sports, you must be made to participate in sports. Right, that comes after, yeah. No, we have to incentivize them, yeah, Mr. Speaker, to do so. And let me tell you, there are some societies where you are required to do so. Not just for sporting purposes, for healthy lifestyle purposes. And in a sense, Mr. Speaker, and it always hurt me when I was Permanent Secretary for Youth and Sports, that we would have sporting school finals. And you look at who are the parents present supporting the children. Who's there for the football finals, the netball finals, the volleyball finals? And the Prime Minister used as his reference for success swimming. Probably the sport where the parental support is greatest for the athletes. We need to create a sports culture. And a sports culture, the starting point for a sports culture is participation in sports from very early ages. Now, if you take that to the next logical step, the school becomes the most important mechanism for in promoting participation in sports. The schools. Children must be involved in physical education from kindergarten. But to do so, you need to have facilities in all the schools. So if you're going to spend $40 million with a long-term objective of where you want to go in sports, a lot of that money have to be spent on the school sporting facilities. What sense are we really making to claim that we're going to build all those huge artificial turf facilities and whatever else, but then at the ground, at the grassroots level, there is no participation? Now, that is critical, Mr. Speaker. We need to invest in the school sporting facilities, first and foremost. And we have it the opposite way. We're spending on the national facilities, enhancing it, a la Don Lockerbie, and we're abandoning the schools. There are children in primary schools that every day are falling on asphalt surfaces, running about playing and scratching themselves and hurting themselves because they don't have proper sports facilities in the schools. We need to address that, Mr. Speaker. Then, Mr. Speaker, that brings into question why you need to have a policy to decide whether you're going to have school facilities, community facilities, zonal facilities, and national facilities. I guess maybe the presentation has that in it, but I have not seen it. So you'll know from year to year how much you invested in school facilities as against community, as against national. Because the issue of maintenance of those national facilities will become a big issue, you know. And the member from Grosley spoke about the water bill for Beauséjour. Think about the maintenance of all those facilities that we are building. We cannot even pay management. You're obviously not involved in sports, honorable member. If you're going to keep it to an international level, you have to spend the money in maintenance. You have to spend the money in maintenance. You have to. And somebody has sold this idea that we can bring in the private sector in St. Lucia and there's going to be huge investment in sports. Have you ever organized a sporting tournament in St. Lucia? Have you ever organized a sporting tournament, a football competition, a football league? To see what you get when you send sponsorship letters out to the private sector? In Barbados, I mean, I see the amount of money that's invested in cricket tournament, in football, in track and field, in Antigua, in Jamaica, not in St. Lucia. We don't have that kind of private sector involvement. We must start, but we don't have it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but we need to talk about the programs too, Mr. Speaker. We need to talk about the PE programs at the school level. We need to talk about the community programs, Mr. Speaker. We need to talk about the elite athlete development program, Mr. Speaker. But all of that has to be rooted in a sports policy as to where we go in, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know you're going to tell me my hour is up despite all the interruptions they've had. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go into too much detail. I'm just flagging issues. There's another one that is very dear to me, sports economy. The need for us to build and create a sports economy in St. Lucia. If you're going to build all those facilities, Mr. Speaker, if you're going to invest in programs, you have to culminate it in the creation of a sports economy. Today is probably not the day for us to go into that discussion as to what constitutes a sports economy and how one can be built. But the point, Mr. Speaker, remains we have been asked to approve monies for a strategy and a plan of $32 million, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not even sure that this is guided by any overarching policy, any overarching stated objectives, Mr. Speaker, that is guiding that investment. And Mr. Speaker, I've raised the issue about how that money is being spent. Because from what I have seen, the facilities that are, I think it's called shovel ready. I'm wondering whether that amount of money can actually deliver those facilities. By the time the project management fees are taken out, which nobody's telling us how much, although I'm comforted by what the member from Rosalie said, but it is still an issue of how much money is actually going to go into construction, whether those facilities can be built. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll be one of the loudest supporters for sports in this country. I believe sports can transform lives. Because, and coming back to the sports policy, Mr. Speaker, I've said to individuals, I don't know if the member from Rosalie or the Ernest will agree with me, they only have about 3 sports that we play in St. Lucia. And listen to me carefully, where our performance is what you probably call world class. Let me explain. Kimani Melius, at 17 years old, went to the ICC Under-19 World Cup. He is world class at his age in cricket. Akim Ogis, at his age, he's world class. If you take the top 20 under 18 batsmen in the world, Kimani will probably be in it. You follow me? So in cricket, our talent level is world class. In track and field, Julian Alfred can win Junior Olympics or Youth Olympics. She's world class. We have enough track and field athletes at that age that can one see as potential world class. To some extent football, but less so. But look at the other sports. Whether our talent pool and our talent we have are at the level where it can be world class. My 2 daughters swim for St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And I keep telling them, you know, about world-class performance, and if at your age you're not reaching certain times, you're not likely to become a gold medal Olympian. And we have to be frank about that. We have to be frank about it. We cannot win a gold medal at Carifta swimming, at least. But we know Kimani Melius is one of the best under-18 cricketers in the world. So it tells you, if you have meager resources, you have to decide according to your policy in the next 5 to 10 years where you're going to spend your money on to produce more world-class athletes. And it's more likely we'll produce world-class athletes in cricket, in track and field, and maybe we can get a few footballers to become professional footballers. I don't know that we will be world-class in some of the other sports. And then you have to decide how you spend the money to get maximum output. All of that discussion has to take place before you spend $32 million on facilities. And let me also say quickly, Mr. Speaker, I think the member from Miku North said it, and I remember once trying to explain to a parent, her child was a very good academic student, but he was also a very good sportsman. And she wanted him to pull out of sports. Her dream for a child is to go to university to get a degree. And I had to say to her, Madam, the easiest way for your child to get a university degree is through sports, not academics. Because there are more sporting scholarships available than academic scholarships. More. I remember one time, Mr. Speaker, the entire St. Lucia female football team got scholarships to go and study in California at university. The entire team decimated the national team. Because sports creates that avenue, Mr. Speaker. Sports. And we must not allow people to believe that you cannot proceed, advance in life, and your professional development and personal development cannot take place if you're involved in sports. It's academics you must focus on. All of that is part of the sports culture we need to create. And as to earning a living, there are cricketers that are millionaires now from playing cricket. That didn't used to happen a few years ago. There's IPL now. You can earn up to 700,000 US for 6 weeks playing in the IPL. So, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of issues that need to be discussed and debated. And I know in the government, and I put in aside all politics, there are individuals in the government. I know they know sports because I've worked with them. I know they understand sports. We might disagree here and there on minor things. And when I hear some of those stories, I wonder, how do they allow those things to pass by them? Mr. Speaker, on that note, I thank you very much.